Welcome to the Libertarian Counterpoint. I'm Richard Fields. On the program today, John Cameron, the author of Rewill and Rewire and Development Officer at Pacific Legal Foundation. Michael Murphy, author of The Government, Editor's Choice on Amazon last year, and also Philip Larrea, editor of Minute Dot, about investments, I'm thinking, right? Correct, okay. Stanford scientists know how to make bone, heart, and 10 other cell types using as their material stem cells. Is there any ethical reason not to, John?
It's going to be a short show. No, stem cells are available without harvesting babies. Stem cells are available in a lot of ways that I would say don't violate. It'd be really hard for me to see someone whose moral position is that although I hear it all the time, that stem cells are somehow evil and immoral to use, when stem cells are available as a result of things that are completely moral and justifiable and don't result in harvesting embryos. So I would say even those who object on religious grounds are really just objecting to the idea that science is advancing. And any advancement, I think especially in this area, is a good one. Anybody that's been in a trauma center after somebody's leg's been sheared off because they rode a motorcycle and weren't as lucky as I was as a motorcycle rider, who's had to watch heart surgery fail, who's seen somebody on dialysis, who's had to deal with not problems of the mind but problems of the body, that science should be able to help with. And votes no is simply saying no to reason, to my firm opinion.
Well, they have now one of the most exciting things, not only with gene therapy, where they can actually remake a gene so that it can cure anything. One of the really exciting things out are something called biosimilars, where they're able to take these biologics and create something very much like them and has the same effect, and do it at a much lower cost. And the issue in both cases is that they have the potential to cure something, and when you're talking about a $3 trillion a year industry in the United States, 20% of our GDP, anything that cures anything is an economic disaster. And so when you want to get to the heart of why there's opposition, whether it's stem cell research, biosimilars, genetic reformation, it all comes down to one thing. You cure something and now you've got no annuity income stream.
Are you saying that the medical, complex medical business, industry, if you will, is trying to thwart progress in order to maintain their paychecks?
Oh, that's undoubtedly true. When we think about, when you hear that phrase, the military-industrial complex, well, that's $1 trillion industry. Imagine the influence of a $3 trillion industry and a whole lot of people. When you're talking about $3 trillion, 20% of GDP, if we really did go about curing things, I mean, it really would be an economic, it would be a very difficult time.
I would like to add a third part to this, because it's something a lot of people don't think about, and it has to do with the mind and the chemicals that the mind produces and the receptors that it has, that they're actually coming out with an ability to create empathy in individuals that have never felt empathy due to the lack of chemicals or the lack of receptors for the chemicals. Now that could change sociopaths and all kinds of people who've lived a whole life without really relating to the feelings that other people have.
So Hillary there might be hope for her?
That would be one way of looking at it, but it's another dimension.
Where Tylenol was proven to inhibit empathy or something? It was some odd study that just came out.
And why not?
That one of the most commonly prescribed drugs, ibuprofens, actually inhibits the receptors to empathy.
I'm in trouble then. Well, I want to add a specific example to your theory that, and I think we're all old enough here to remember what it used to be like when you had an ulcer. Ulcers were thought to be caused by stress. And an Australian doctor who didn't have specific training, didn't have a big following, kept seeing a certain type of bacteria in people who had ulcers. And he theorized that that this bacteria was causing ulcers. And so he experimented on himself by giving himself that bacteria into his gut. And he developed an ulcer. They treated the bacteria, the ulcer went away. It took him 10 years of repeatedly proving over and over and over again the cause and effect. Papers were suppressed, people made fun of him, he was shunned, all the rest of that. And why? Because there were many of us probably know people who are missing half of their stomach, because what they would do is they'd take out parts of people's stomach that were ulcerated, thinking that was the cure. And what happens when you take out somebody's stomach? You pay for an operating room, you pay for follow-up, you pay for transfusions, there are nurses, there are gas passers, there are radiologists, there are surgeons, and all the rest of that. And it was $1 billion plus industry, 40 years ago. So that's just one small example to support what you're talking about. And the opposite side of that is when the medical industry gets new toys, they invent new ways to create income streams. The example of the oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank. So there are X-rays and there are MRIs. When people used to have back pain, doctors would prescribe 10 days of bed rest. And when people had back pain and bad injuries, 80% of the population after 2 weeks of bed rest was whole and good and ready to work. So they got this new toy called the MRI. And they thought, oh, now we can see soft tissue injuries. So they thought, oh, I can see what's wrong with this back. I can go fix it. So as an experiment, a few years into the whole back surgery happy world, somebody did a little experiment. They took MRIs of 250 backs where people experienced no pain or problems with their back whatsoever, and had them analyzed by radiologists and surgeons, and they recommended surgery in over 50% of the cases. So two sides of that coin. And invariably, whenever there's been a scientific advance, and certain industry might go away. For example, the automobile, the buggy whip industry went away. But think of all the efficiencies of scale, the freedom of movement, the individual freedom of families being able to, for example, leave the Dust Bowl and go to California. So the suppression of one thing leads to the growth of another.
Well, and
So
it's a
even
political
that
problem,
reason for it.
too,
Yeah.
in the sense when you look at it from whatever field that you're coming from, you tend to have solutions to the world's problems, whether you're an accountant, a politician, a military man, a doctor. You tend to look at the world through your lens, and your lens has the answer to everything. Republicans know how to fix the world. Democrats know how to fix the world. Libertarians know how to fix the world. So it's just kind of interesting how people are. Do they do the research? Do they ever try to really venture outside of their box that they grew up in, so to speak?
I'm struggling for a word. Who were the people that destroyed the looms back in 17th or 18th century England because they were afraid that they were going to lose their spinning jobs? There was a word for it, but it's the idea of people who are
They were called lunatics, if I'm not mistaken.
Lunatics.
Lunatics, yeah.
people who are afraid of
Just make that
change
up,
because it will
Philip.
take
It's
their
funny.
job, whether it's immigrants, Luddites. That's the word. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. So what I'm hearing you guys say is that the objection to stem cell cures, stem cell research, and so forth is really a Luddite reaction to medical progress. Is that what I'm hearing?
And, what you
And
talked
others.
about, the vested interest.
Vested interest is Luddite. I mean, the Luddites were trying to protect their vested interest of running spinning machines, spinning wheels. So anyway, that's one side of it. Another side of it, as you mentioned, the advancement of science creates new jobs in new fields that didn't even exist before. In the case of the automobile, obviously tourism and travel and commuting and all the rest. Now, is there a possibility that stem cell research and being able to cure hitherto uncurable diseases will lead to something approaching the singularity, where human life is extended almost indefinitely?
The unintended consequences, I'm reminded of the old joke of why husbands die sooner than wives, and the answer is because they want to. There comes a point,
It's funny.
and we have seen it in a number of cases. I'm thinking of, Robin Williams comes to mind for one. We have made it almost a social imperative. We've taken the right away from the individual to decide how long they want to live, and the quality of life that they want to enjoy. So how often do we hear you should not smoke or drink or eat candy or what have you, and on the premise that it'll kill you eventually? Well, not good enough. And so I do think that there is a place in the human psyche that just has had enough. There comes a time when people say, I've had enough. And I've seen more people die, especially in my line of work, it's seeing generations of families. I've seen more people die for what seems to be no other reason than because they want to.
Turn their face to the wall. It's
Appointments, one fewer thing to look forward to, a lack of a purpose for going on. I've done all I want to do. That there is a place, there's a kind of a finite limitation in the human spirit. That
I'm done, goodbye.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Unless you can find the passion. Like Leonard Bernstein is a great example, conducting until his late 90s. His body wore out before his will did. And so for those, and I think the people in the world that create the most good are those people whose spirits don't burn out. And so this would be an opportunity for the human race to have the best and the brightest, the most focused and the most creative, add value for years and years and years and years. And so I think...
Well, these things are going to happen.
I think
if we
it's-
don't
I
do it
think
in the
it's-
United States, they're going to do it somewhere.
Well, I'm
yeah.
willing to bet that it's already happening in China.
Exactly.
I'm not saying China's a good place, but...
And I think the reciprocal is true, too. If you have a healthy life, if you have a life where it's largely free of pain, largely free of worry, economic concern, et cetera, you will probably be able to develop and maintain passions a lot easier than if you're facing a life of adversity of one kind or another.
Well, my father turned his face to the wall. He'd had a disappointing life. He left his soul on Anzio Beach, and he managed to stay awake, alive for many, many years after that, 50. But, toward the end, he was an active man who loved golf and fishing and all the rest of that. He was on oxygen for the last 8 years, and because he smoked so heavily, his appendages started losing blood flow, and he had operations, and he barely survived. And eventually, it was just a matter of, it's too much effort to go on. So I absolutely agree that if you wake up in the morning and can jump out of bed without, stretching everything first, and the first step's not painful, it's a whole lot easier to get out of bed.
Well, and also, if you want to explore planets and other galaxies, and you need to have that longer lifespan in order to
Even
make
other
that
solar
journey.
systems.
Other solar systems. And so, there's a lot of things that factor into this, and it is what is natural. Like, I always had a problem with natural law. It's like, everything's natural. It's of nature, directly or indirectly. Everything that we do is of nature. And it's, people that are religious try to draw lines and say, well, this is ethical and this is unethical and so on and so forth. And I think when we intend to do harm, then we cross ethical boundaries. But when we intend to do good, then intentions are very important, and practicing procedures where we try to watch out and make sure that bad things don't happen, thalidomide babies and so on and so forth, that's important too.
You brought up a great point, and I'm not slamming religion right now. In the Bible, they talk about Methuselah and all the rest of those people living for hundreds of years, nearly 1,000 years. So if we have the ability to, wouldn't that argument be, well, this is the way God intended, and somehow we've managed to mess that up, and we're just going to extend life back to the level that they talked about in biblical terms.
There was something wrong with that apple.
How could it be a problem?
And Michael, I can't help but add, you brought up my favorite Henry David Thoreau quote, which is, if I knew for a certainty that a man was coming down the road to do me good, I would run out the back door as fast as I can.
meaning good intentions often have bad
Best
results.
intentions of mice and men.
Yeah. Moving on to, we're talking about, essentially eternal life and medical miracles and all that. Let's move to a darker subject. The link between the viral videos of police beatings and police killings, which have been popularized, if that's the right word, have become endemic since the cell phone ability of recording that sort of thing, and the resulting, there's no other word for it, assassination of police officers by young black men with military training. Obviously, the violence that we see portrayed on those videos is probably something that has been going on much before the videos were ever begun to be recorded. I don't think there's anything new there, but it's new information as far as the public imagination is concerned. Mike, is there any ethical or any practical concerns about taking videos of police mayhem and putting them online?
I don't see any ethical problem with it at all. I mean, that's part of our freedom to distribute knowledge, and the press has been doing it for years. Why do they have to have an exclusive pass for taking a video? Why can't everybody take a video? So I think, ethically speaking, we've got far more good coming from it than we really have bad from coming. These videos have exposed all kinds of things, and it goes back down to that rule of law. Do we rule by fear or do we rule by love? And I think there would be a strong case for the rule by love. And I think that when we rule by fear, that fear begets fear. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. And there's that for both sides of the coin on this one. So as far as I'm concerned, yeah, I think that videos, it's kind of scary because our privacy is so invaded by everybody's videos and their ability to put anything on YouTube. And so, again, we have personal ethical responsibilities, and we have to look at the intent, as the law does. We have to look at the people's intent, and then we have to look at their lack of or their having responsibility.
The other thing I think that needs to be pointed out is that policing is actually one of the safer occupations compared to a whole lot of other occupations like farming or
Mining.
Lineman
timber
is a good one.
lineman, any number of
If there was any
occupations.
people working in logging anymore,
Logging, yeah.
would have been on that list, yeah.
And the other part of that is that policing has become much more safe in the last 30 or 40 years. There are a lot less injuries and police deaths on the job now than there were 20, 30, 40 years ago as a result of, I'm assuming as a result of any number of different things, but certainly police protecting their own is probably part of that, and police protecting their own is one of the reasons we see an awful lot of thin blue line, police never rat on each other, police violence that goes unchecked and that goes unpunished by the district attorney's office and by courts of law. Freddie Gray comes to mind. Nobody has gone to jail for that.
We love that phrase, rule of law, and both the Republicans and Democrats use it. I would argue that we have no rule of law, and that is the source of the problem. We have lots of laws, but what we don't have is a rule of law, the original concept being that a person was secure in their person and property from seizure if they had not done something to somebody else. And so that we have, look how many of these people are being killed over traffic tickets.
You're moving on to my next point, which is a taillight out leads to a shooting death, a cop killing a kid.
I would add one more side to this. What that caused
selling cigarettes, onesie cigarettes leads to
DVDs on the
death by
street corner.
choking.
It's
What?
no accident that this started to happen in terms of military-style operations that was concurrent with all the things that went on with Hillary Clinton over the course of the summer, completely exonerated. All of the policemen who 2 years ago were involved in some of the Tamir Rice shooting in Cleveland, you can go on, and they all went to trial, and they were all the policemen were exonerated. And so you could certainly see this path where people say, look, the rule of law doesn't apply. We have no rule of law. All you have is they've got force, we've got force. That's what we're down to. So I would make the argument it is not rule of law. It is the absence now of rule of law.
Well, it's the rule of too much law. It's the rule of selective enforcement of way too many really, really silly laws, like selling cigarettes by one at a time, like having a taillight out. Why should you be pulled over for a taillight out? All they got to do is send you a ticket in the mail. They've got your license plate. There's no reason to pull somebody over for that.
This guy
Minor safety considerations
This guy
aside.
had like 50 or 60 traffic violations, so, either he was really one unlucky guy.
Or
Do
he-
any of you trust authority? I mean, it really
Yeah.
comes down to, really, here we are, 4 white males. Do we trust authority?
No.
And can you imagine being a black man?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
In a car.
Point. Good
Exactly.
point.
In a car.
Yeah.
With a broken tail light.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
and I'm not
Period.
making,
Just
but
in a
let's,
car.
let's just, for a second, I'll throw something else out. This population size is very small. This population size is very small. I don't
Population
think
size of what?
the population size of young black men with military training shooting cops. It's a population
Yeah.
size of 2.
So far.
If
In the-
we're,
but in the last, 3 or 4 weeks?
so, if 5 years from now, we have young black men with military training shooting a cop every week, then I would say there's a cause and effect. We can assume a cause and effect because we're seeing it.
Well,
But this is a very small population
You add the
size.
powers, the exponential powers of the internet and video being produced by anybody all day long, and we have an example of something that happens, and now it's magnified to the world within minutes, not by waiting till tomorrow morning's paper.
And I agree, and I still,
I will say one thing
yeah.
that's totally counterproductive happened in North Carolina, the same place that outlawed transgender toilets or whatever. North Carolina has made it illegal for police videos, on camera videos, police car videos to be made public. So they can use them for their own purposes, but they're not available, Freedom of Information Act, or to be disclosed to the public.
Yes, they do fear our interpretation.
Well, and the problem with all of that is that when people exhaust civil recourse, they go to uncivil recourse. And so as we are losing the sense that there is any hope for justice in a court of law, or that it's becoming clear that people are being targeted for, the most minor thing, that there's something else going on, and when these people cannot get redress in our courts or, wherever, what other options are there really?
Well, it's a psychological factor too, because people are being driven. When you do something like you say that you can't expose these videos to the public, these are fear-driven actions. And fear-driven actions are preemptive strikes. We're doing preemptive things to make sure that something that might happen doesn't happen. And this is another order of being safe and secure versus having freedom. It really comes down to that in the end. And I think I choose freedom over safety and security.
you bring this up to fear. We are being basically governed by threat, and one of the young law clerks was in the Northeast wrote a very nice paper on it. I can't remember his name. It was about a 50-page paper for his law review about government by threat. We have government now in the case of Clean Water Act and all these other things where they attempt to enforce their will, not the rule of law, on citizenry by threatening them with actions. And the mere threat, the action threatened is so overwhelming, fines of $70,000 a day or jail time or whatever, that even if what you're doing has no relation to something that's illegal, that's even on the books is illegal, your choice in many times is to submit to that threat. And we've become a country where we are being ruled by those in authority by constant threat.
Speaking of threats, we have the recent experience of the Iron Curtain, of the Soviet bloc, of the Eastern European countries that were under the iron rule of socialism and communism. And after the Berlin Wall fell, they were all more or less free, and they freed their economies at varying paces. Some went cold turkey and went free market right away, like the Czech Republic. Some decided, well, we need to do this gradually, like the Ukraine. Others were somewhere in between, like Russia. Which way worked best, John?
Well, I think you can actually look at an earlier example that's better documented. But the way obviously worked best, the Czech Republic was quick and it was best. Look at the end of World War II, an economy that was completely decimated, Germany, compared to an economy that was hurt by a war effort and changed, Britain. And at the end of World War II, Germany went with, in essence, with some modifications, a free market type economy. And Britain, which was much less damaged by the war than Germany, was rubble. Lost, what, 40% of its male population, or 50, or maybe even 60%.
But ironically, the one that recovered fastest,
Germany.
was the Soviet Union, and that was not a free market economy.
I'm not sure that they recovered that quickly.
They recovered very quickly. Matter of fact, before the war was over, they recovered tremendously. That's how they got into Germany and almost took the whole enchilada. If we
Well,
didn't step in.
I don't know if you can call it
I'm not
recovery.
sure.
I might argue with that if you can call it recovery, where they had one thing, which is a massive army, and that massive army was basically bought and paid for by the U.S. And again, you had one part of their economy which was thriving and successful. Was the life of the ordinary Soviet? Did it recover? And was it as good as, let's just say, West Germany?
Compare East Germany with West Germany. The lifestyle in East Germany was an order of magnitude
No, in the
worse.
long term, communism never works, but in the short run.
Well, yeah, in the short run.
But I want to
for
say why I'm
specific-
saying this statement.
Okay.
I used to train tennis players. I was a tennis pro. And I learned from Vic Braden, and I learned a lot of my teaching methods from him. And a lot of this is about change management, is what we call it in business nowadays. It's how you do it more than what you do. And when you're introducing something dramatic, for example, this coaches would come to me, Michael, would you take this student? She keeps hitting the ball on the right fence, and I can't do anything with her. I'm about ready to hit her over the head with my racket. Can you take this? I said, oh, sure, no problem. Lady comes up, stands at the line. I say, okay, would you do me a favor and hit the ball into the left fence? Of course, she aims for the left fence, and the ball goes right down the middle where it was supposed to go in the first place. And now she felt it. She felt the action. So every mistake we make in life lives with us for our whole life, if we can recall it. They all live with us. And in order to correct a mistake like that, we have to do, for 1,000 mistakes, we have to do 1,000 things correctly to do that. And that takes forever to inch towards that 1,000. But if you do it immediately by going to the left fence and you say, okay, for 1,000 mistakes, I'm going to make up for it by going so far over here that now I'm back to center.
So that's
So
why it
freedom.
works. That's why fast works better. That's the show. We'll see you again next week, same time, same place
Freedom
on
and
the Libertarian
fast.
Counterpoint, on the web at accesssacramento.org, on YouTube, and of course on Channel 17 Sacramento and cable channels all over the place. Thank you very much for being part of the show. See you again next week.
Well, thank you for having me on the show, Richard. Really appreciate it.